Good morning. Another Sunday edition kicking off the month of June. And joining us in studio, Rochelle, Fire Chief Dave Sawlsville. Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you here. First time visiting with you. So to get things started, first off, before you were a fire chief, you were a young Dave somewhere else. Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up here in Rochelle. I was born at Rochelle Hospital and grew up here. A couple of trips here and there, but basically born and raised here.
So this is definitely your hometown.
This is my hometown.
And you got to move up the ranks and get to be chief. When did you start firefighting?
So I started as a paid-on-call firefighter in July of 1980. You probably remember that.
Yeah, I was alive. That part's true.
Yeah. So I started as a paid-on-call in July of 1980. In 1987, I was hired on as a full-time firefighter, and in 1990. Geez, I think I'd remember. At some point, I was promoted to lieutenant, and then I spent a little time as an acting chief and a little time as an interim chief, and then for the last 8 years, I've been the full-time chief.
You got to change out the helmets.
Yeah, a couple of times, yeah.
So being chief has a lot of responsibilities with it. Not only are you obviously managing scenes of, big events and things like that, and making the tough decisions as to how to tackle either a horrific car accident, a situation on the interstate, fires, chemical spills, things like that, which is a lot of stuff to manage.
Yep.
But there's day-to-day things that a fire chief does that most people don't realize you probably have to do.
Yeah, and if you're the Rochelle chief, it's even a little more unique situation. So, I mean, a fire chief wears a white helmet, but he also wears lots of hats like you talked about. But if you're the Rochelle fire chief, you're also the district chief for the Ogilvie Fire Protection District, which incorporates Creston, Hillcrest, Flag Center, and Stewart, which is 4 additional stations and 135 square miles of area. And an additional 65, give or take, firefighters. Now, each rural station has its own area chief, but you're the district chief. So the city of Rochelle fire chief, but also the district chief for the Ogilvie Fire Protection District.
And that's a lot of miles of tollway and interstate and county highways.
Tollway, interstate, 2 Class 1 railroads, 1 ethanol plant.
Ethanol plant, yeah. And that's the thing about a lot of the industry around here is that, the industry is great. It provides jobs, but boy, there is a risk there with any type of industry or apparatuses that they have. That's a lot of equipment running 24/7. There's a lot of potential there for hazardous materials or other types of spills. What type of relationship do you have with those industries in the area to make sure you guys know what you're getting into?
So with the ethanol plant specifically, we have a great relationship. So we train out there a couple of times a year with their safety people. So we did some extensive pre-planning and conversations with their engineering. So we wrote protocols specifically for that facility. And so we have a really good plan in place, and they are great. They are super safety conscious and very open. They're very transparent. And like I said, and I would say they're really great neighbors to work with.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah, because in a lot of those places, there's things that companies do and handle materials that maybe the public doesn't realize what type of hazardous materials they have, maybe not in large quantities,
right?
But they still deal with some pretty volatile products here and there. And you guys have to know that when you pull into that parking lot with your lights going, you really do need to know what's going on inside that building.
Well, and for fixed facilities, we're in pretty good shape. We have a really thorough, robust pre-planning program in place where we walk the buildings, we measure the buildings, we look at their inventory. We have a part-time individual, a retired police officer, and that's his job. He goes around and he takes pictures and gets on Google Map and plots out the size of the building and where the hazards are, where the hydrants are located. So we have a really good pre-planning program. So for fixed facilities, we're in pretty good shape. It's the transportation. It's the stuff that's rolling down the interstates and the tollways and on the rail, because that's the mixed bag, right? That you don't know until sometimes when you get there, and see the purple haze, that you're like, okay, this is not good. So,
and you guys, I'm sure in firefighter circles, they probably wrote a couple of books about what happened in Pennsylvania last year. about the big derailment there
Sure.
and the big fire and spill and what they were burning off.
Yeah.
So and because Rochelle is literally the intersection of some major rail lines, a lot of things roll through this town.
Yes.
And you guys must have to prepare and practice for almost any scenario.
Right. So we're considered an all-hazard fire department, which means we do fire and EMS, technical rescue, hazmat, water. So yeah, we're all hazard, and so we train for lots of scenarios. You can't train for them all. You count on, like I said earlier, relationships. When it comes to the two railroads, we have a good relationship with their two hazmat folks from BNSF and Union Pacific, and so I have them on speed dial, right? So if there's something that we're faced with that I have questions for, they're a phone call away, and they take that phone call every time. So
Rochelle Fire Chief Dave Sawlsville in the studio with us, and let's take a step towards the more human level, the street level, about all the homes and apartment buildings and care facilities and things like that you guys have to watch over as well. Homeowners, it's sort of a thing where every homeowner really does believe the fire is going to happen at somebody else's house.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
so you don't do
Yeah.
all the things you should. You don't change that furnace filter as often as you
Right.
should. That thing behind the dryer, I don't know. Just let it plug itself up.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And that smoke detector, you needed the battery for a remote. Those things individually on their own may not cause a house fire. But, boy, once one thing happens,
Right.
you are setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. What are some of the basic things homeowners or people who are renting a home need to be aware of just to sort of reduce that risk factor?
Right. So, well, you hit it. One of the things is awareness, right? So, in the state of Illinois, back in the early 90s, they made it a state law that you have to have a working smoke detector in your house within 15 feet of where anybody sleeps, right? So, but then they came back a couple years later and ran some numbers and found out that about 90% of the homes had smoke detectors in them. About 50 of them didn't work. 50% of them didn't work.
Wow.
Because they had taken the battery went low and started chirping, so they just took it out, or every time somebody burnt food on the stove, it went off, and they got tired of listening to it. So, so we tried to educate the problem away. We tried to engineer the problem away. So now in Illinois, if you buy a smoke alarm, it has to have a 10-year lithium battery that you can't take out.
Yeah.
But the other part of, as far as the education is, I can't say this enough, and I've said it a lot, but fires are incredibly different today. Again, I've been at this a day or two. So back in the day, what was burning in people's homes was wood or wool or cotton. So you had 10 minutes, right, to get to. But at the detection of a fire, you had 10 minutes. Today, what's burning in your houses is vinyl and polyester. And so in the 70s and 80s, we saw ceiling temperatures of 800 with houses that had fires in them. Today, we're seeing ceiling temperatures in excess of 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 degrees. And it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes has turned into 2. So you have no time, right? You have got to have working smoke alarms. And you have to practice what to do, especially if you have children, right? So they're easily disoriented, right? So they're used to waking up in the morning and being able to see across the room. But now it's 3 a.m. and a smoke alarm goes off and they can't see across their room. And so so not only do you have to have a working smoke alarm, but you have to practice and teach them what to do, how to get out, and then where to congregate, where to meet once they're outside.
Yeah.
It's the young and the old, the elderly that suffer the most, right? Because again, young get disoriented, and the elderly don't move as fast as they used to, and so they really need every second they can get. And so I can't overemphasize. And so if you've watched some of our programs recently, we are really doing everything we can to get smoke alarms in people's houses. We've given away hundreds of smoke alarms.
Yeah.
Just for that reason, because again, what's burning in your house is fast and hot. And the construction, if a house was built in 1960, 1970, it was built with dimensional lumber. Nowadays, it's built with lightweight construction. It gets you longer spans in your living rooms for your open floor concept. It gets you longer spans in your basement. But that is not dimensional lumber. That's lightweight. And so those lightweight engineered floor trusses in your house will fail within 10 minutes of direct flame contact. So again,
Yeah.
what's burning your house is hot, and what your house is made out of is not what it was made out of 30 years ago. So the safest place for a house fire is outside.
Yeah. And obviously have a fire extinguisher. Kitchens are
Sure.
are clearly one of the main sources for fires. If you are deep frying something, keep the big gallon jug of water nearby.
No, that's not a great idea.
No, that's not a good idea.
But you're right. Cooking is the number one cause of residential house fires. And so, there's all kinds of folklore about what to do with a grease fire, right? So, do you throw flour on it, or is it baking powder, is it baking soda, or don't do any of those things, and don't do water, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a frying pan, your best bet is just to put the lid on it and turn the heat off and leave it. If it's a deep fat fryer and it's really rocking, then your best bet is a little $30 2.5 pound fire extinguisher, dry chemical fire extinguisher does great.
And shut the heat source off.
And then leave it. Sometimes because it smokes so bad, sometimes folks want to grab that pan and try to get outside with it. And as they're going through their house, they're dropping fire as they go.
Yeah.
So if you're not comfortable putting a lid on it, hit it with an extinguisher. Those extinguishers, what's coming out of there is basically ground up clay. It's non-toxic. It does come out at 195 psi, so you don't have to be on top of that fire. You can hit it from 15 feet away, and it'll do a great job. And so, those are your two best bets. But then again, call us. Even if you think you have it out, or that's what we're there for. So we would rather show up and just have to help you clear a little bit of smoke and be there for 15 minutes and go home. Then you don't call us, and now we're here all night, right?
And to be honest, every firefighter loves trudging through a house in boots. It's a thrill to them to see new living rooms and new kitchens in full gear. Yeah. I think one of the kitchen tips that I heard that seems so logical to me that it never occurred to me, and I don't know why, was just shutting the oven door.
Shutting the oven door, yeah. So again, it's because we're health conscious cooking, we're getting away from frying and more into baking. But baking any kind of meat still produces a lot of grease, and so those ovens are designed to take 600 degrees. So if you close the door, turn the heat off, and leave it alone, it'll go out. Yeah, it'll stay within the confines of that oven. Yep.
Now it's going to be smoky in there, but
we'll come help with that. We have big fans.
Rochelle, Fire Chief Dave Sawlsville in the studio. We've talked a bit about the people who are the victims of fire, so to speak, people who have to go through dealing with a house fire or perhaps a fire in the workplace. Let's talk a little bit about those who battle the fire and firefighters and the amount of training that you guys have to do. Rochelle's unique. You've gone a long ways to help train firefighters with your own facilities.
Correct. Yeah. So it's always been a kind of a cause of mine. I would always like to have the firefighters as prepared as possible when they show up to do the job that you guys are paying them to do, right? And so the best way to make sure that they're prepared is train. And so we train every day on something. It got to be a bit of an issue for training because we didn't have a facility for that. So you had to set up whatever training you could within the firehouse, mazes or props or whatever. And so as our call volume continued to increase, we're super, super busy. And so by the time you got the training set up and got to actual training, you were going to get a couple calls in between. And so it was really affecting our ability to train. Plus the design of our fire station, it's a great station, but it's not conducive to some of the training. You can't throw ladders, for example.
Yeah.
We have a beautiful metal awning around our building, and throwing ladders against that doesn't make it beautiful, right?
Yeah.
It dents and scratches it. And so it's one of the basic things the firefighters are expected to be able to do is throw ladders effectively, efficiently, quickly. And so we couldn't practice that. And so a couple of years, probably 5 years ago, we started talking about maybe it's time to have a designated training facility. And so the Ogley Fire Protection District was on board from Jump Street. Their board has been so supportive. And so we started looking for a job, for a place to build this. We were hoping to find some property that somebody already owned, to keep the cost down, because there was no budget for this project. It was a shoestring kind of operation. So, and then as fate would have it, somebody donated some land to the city. It just fell out of the sky. So now we went from having no place to having 12 acres. We're
And
like, go ahead.
yeah, and if somebody wants to get involved in the Rochelle Fire Department or in any of the fire departments in the district and wants to see all those neat training facilities, you guys are always looking for people.
Always looking for people. And so now with a designated training site, we train every day. But to your other point, we are always looking. And so as a nationwide trend for many, many years, volunteer firefighters have been kind of disappearing. And so after the pandemic, they really disappeared. And so firefighters, our fire departments across the state and across the country are desperate for firefighters, also EMS folks, same thing. We have a great program for anybody that's looking to get into the business. You can come down, take out an application. We'll put you on as a paid on-call firefighter. And if you decide it's for you, we provide thousands of dollars of free training, thousands of dollars. So
I would love to do that. I just don't like wearing gloves. Is that a problem?
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah,
So
that'll be an issue.
Depends on how you feel about your hands. So.
Fire Chief Dave Sawlsville, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invite.